Welcome, Underhive scumbags, to Chronicles from the Underhive, a Necromunda and Post Apocalyptic podcast. My name's Tom.
And my name's Michael.
And this is the very first episode of our Necromunda themed podcast, but we will go into other post-apocalyptic games throughout the year as well. This episode is just for us to talk about how we're going to run our podcast. We're going to talk about Necromunda itself today, what it's at currently, and what we're planning to do for the future. Essentially, this is just our first introduction, our zero podcast, into why we are running it and what we plan to do for the future. We are supposed to have one more podcast member here. His name's Eren. He informed us today that he's got the flu, so he's unable to attend. But we did have Ratskin Scout tell us that we saw him going into the Pleasure Dome last night, and he had a special dance from Big Sally. So I think he might have scabies rot, which is why he's not here today. Unfortunately, he's also the editor, so he might also take out the explanation as to why he's not here today. So we're going to go into the brief reasons as to why we started the podcast. I want to let Michael go first because
excellent.
My brain is now still trying to work out, and Michael's obviously part of a podcast. I'm sure you want to explain that too. And so he's got more knowledge about this than me, and I'm going to put all the pressure on him. I
know nothing. Anyway, so a little bit about me. I've been playing Games Workshop games since the 80s because I'm an old fossil. I've dipped into and out of pretty much all of their game systems. I like the bigger games, 40k and fantasy, and I've always tried to keep up to date with the rules, even if I haven't played. When Necromunda came out, I was very excited about that because it just looked amazing. All the game models looked great. And I went halves with one of my gaming buddies at the time. We bought the box set and the supplement, and then we just played that to death. There was no local clubs that I knew about back then. It's not like the sort of the golden age of gaming nowadays, where you can find a club sort of around the corner from most places. And I didn't really fancy playing in a Games Workshop store. It was all a bit public for my taste.
Yeah, it's always really tight as well.
Yeah, there's never a lot of space. You've got a bit of gamer funk going on.
Yeah, it's warm.
That's never good.
It's definitely warm.
I used to have about 3 or 4 games, just because I liked everything. But never really played all that much. Game was fun. I really enjoyed the levelling up and the levelling down through injuries and stuff. It was just a really great part of the game. The only thing I did discover through playing Necromunda was that I didn't actually like the converting side of things. The fact of putting a model together, and I would always do it like the box art and everything.
Yeah.
And I play it and said, oh right, now you've got to change his gun. And I had no interest in that at the time. How times change. I used to like large games as well, so I was drawn to the scavies with the zombies and everything. But then you run into another problem where you're trying to remember who's who and who's got what.
Yeah.
And that was a little bit tedious. After Necromunda, life happened, as it does for lots of gamers.
Yeah.
And you kind of put your hobby on hold. Games Workshop stopped supporting it, not because I stopped playing it, but they just chose not to.
Michael stopped playing it.
I sold off the games, as you do. You think, I'm never going to play this again. But my friend still has the books, so I need to go and claw those back off him.
Awesome.
I got back into hobbying probably about 6 years ago. I discovered the Overlords Club, which is primarily a 40k, or exclusively a 40k club. And they just inspired me because the guys there are just awesome. And seeing all their painted models and their armies and stuff inspired me to get the paintbrush out finally. Yeah. And rather than playing in bare plastic and bare metal, actually to get stuff painted. I now enjoy converting stuff, and I'm perfectly happy to go and spend 40 quid on a model and then hack it up straight out of the box. Whereas years ago I would never have considered doing that.
Yeah.
No, it's got to be how it is on the picture. I'm definitely a speed painter. That kind of sums me up. I don't mind a challenge of just throwing 50 models in front of me and I'll just sit down and blast through them.
Your pace is amazing.
I'm not a great painter, but what I try to do with my dodgy eyesight and shaky hands is try and get the colours in the right places. I don't do hardly any mixing or blending or anything like that. I literally put the base colours on, throw a wash over the top, and that just about saves the day. But from a distance, on the table, they look okay, and that's good for me.
I mean, being a podcast, it's not. But yeah, I mean, do have a Facebook page, which will make sense when we start talking about some of our models, and we will always post what we talk about on the page. So even though we are talking about something you might not see this second,
because that's great radio.
Yeah, these models will be on before the games are released, so you'll actually most of the time see these pictures probably just before the actual podcast is released anyway. So you'll be looking at these pictures hopefully when we are talking about them to actually wonder what we are actually going on about.
And then fairly recently the Necromunda rumours came out, and all of a sudden enthusiasm was renewed for the game that I hadn't touched for decades. I downloaded the rules, had a skim through those, had a chat with Tom because there was a number of people that are interested in playing, and obviously from the hobby perspective. I went through my bits box, threw a load of models together and created a game basically just from bits and pieces, and that's kind of where I am. Looking forward, I don't intend buying any more models, but we all know how that goes. I'm hoping that I can just create a number of games to satisfy all the different categories and the different houses and stuff, just from the stuff that I've got. Maybe buy one or two key models, but we'll see how that goes.
Well, hopefully they might release single models like they do we're looking at obviously the fact that they've done Blood Bowl in the past, and that you had your plastic miniatures, but then they released special characters. So
perhaps things like the heavies or the leaders or a special character or something with a particular weapon loadout might be a Forge World sort of resin option.
Seeing some of the old bounty hunters and bits and pieces that they've had in the past that you could buy as single models that weren't technically part of your gang, but
like a mercenary that you can just add in. So
that would be really cool.
Entirely possible. And then from a podcasting perspective, I've appeared on a few shows for the Overlords, which unfortunately that podcast and the club are calling it a day now, which is a great shame, but I'm still going to stay in contact with the guys because they're just an awesome bunch of fellas. So I've been on a few shows. I've got no idea how the mechanics of doing a podcast work. I'll just sit here and waffle a bit. So we'll see how that goes. And then going forwards, I've got a few personal goals I want to try and achieve, and hopefully the podcast and ultimately the Facebook group and whatever will encourage me to fulfill these. I want to create a number of games for cheap. That's basically what I want to do. I want to make a gaming table and collect a load of scenery to populate that table and just make it look awesome. I want to actually play some games and actually make use of the table that I've got. And there is a number of people that are local to me that I could get to play with, so that is a good sign. Plus, with the renewed enthusiasm of the game coming out, finding new players or other players coming out of the woodwork shouldn't be too much of an issue. And then I just want to make loads of bits of scatter terrain, bits of pipes and crates as you do. And then an ultimate challenge that I'd like to have for myself, harking back to the days when I didn't like converting. I'd like to have a go at magnetising a gang.
Nice.
So that I can just magnetise all the options for when that model progresses and changes his loadout, and then just snap fit everything on.
I mean, when we as we're going through this podcast, each month we will be going through and conversion and lore. I mean, we will discuss this in a sec about what this podcast is kind of aiming for, but definitely building and stuff and magnetising, and we'll be looking at what models suit that well. Because I know
the stuff that I've used in this initial setup draws heavily on Games Workshop's Cultists from the Dark Vengeance box set, and because they are a static pose model without separate arms and things like that, converting them is very difficult unless the particular model had a free arm out in space that you could then cut and change. But I hope, as far as I know, the new models are a multi-part kit as such, although I don't think anyone's seen any sprues.
No, and I know that even with things like some of the other GW stuff, which is kind of multi-part, like the Scions and bits and pieces, which I've used heavily on some of my models and bits and pieces, it's still difficult to convert sometimes because the arms are still quite static in the way they fit to the set model shoulders.
Designed to go one way.
Yeah, but you've got then 3 different gun options, which then kind of makes it multi-pose in a way, because you can pose it in 3 different ways. It's just the arm on each of those is very similar. But I love cutting things apart. So on Facebook as well, I'll have a lot of pictures of where I have been cutting and where I have been doing it, and where I've added green stuff to try and make the arms slightly different. I mean, I'll probably talk about myself then. I won't be able to do as well as Michael just did because he's a podcast professional, even though he puts it down.
There'll be some sniggers at that.
I got into the game a long while back as well, and it was through 40k. I think it's whichever edition was the one where the Space Marines had the guns stuck to the chest.
That's
and the Gretchens had the
second edition.
And then so I had second and went into third, and then did the same thing of where I became a slightly older teenager, and like girls and going out and stuff became a thing.
Yeah, there's beer and girls.
And then got back into it in the same way actually through the Overlords podcast. I was with my well, she's my wife now, but she was my my girlfriend at the time.
Careful now, you're on dodgy ground. Get it right.
I'm just trying to think. Well, she won't listen to this, thankfully, so it doesn't really matter. But it was at the time where settled, and I thought, well, the podcasts are things now, and I had my my iPhone, and I thought, well, I'll listen and see what there is around. And the Overlords podcast was a podcast, and I was hooked, and I got back into the hobby. And my love is very much converting and making something different. I can't really leave models stock. I don't know why, it's just an obsession of mine. And also never using really the models for their intention. Space Marines obviously I use for the Space Marines, but my cultists aren't cultists, my Scions aren't Scions.
Yeah, Count says is definitely the way to go. I think.
Yeah, I just love it, and I don't think I've loved Necromunda. I love the way it plays. Like I said, I love the way it scales up and can scale down. You can get your arm blown off or your eye taken out, and you can have a bionic put in. And I love being able to take that away and put a new one on. I think that's why I prefer super glue to plastic glue, and I know that always starts up a bit of fun between people, but yeah, it's just I do like that. I've had an Escher model who managed to source a power axe, so taking a gun off and building a new power axe. And my Escher models, strange enough, aren't Escher, they're Dark Angels and bits and pieces. Yeah. Again, in the podcast we will go into all the alternatives, what they can be, and then encouraging everyone else to join the Facebook group and saying, this is how I built my Eschers and this is what I use. So it's all going to be very community based, and just adding your bits and showing us how you manage to do stuff too. And now moving on into the future ones, I've seen what I'd like to do in the future. I've got 5 gangs already that I've built and converted. Only 2 of those have been painted. That's my Arbites and my Escher models. Again, none of them are the originals. And I've got 3 that I need to complete. My Pit Slaves, which aren't original. My Goliaths, which have started to get painted, but they're not original, they're from Chaos parts. And my Vansar, which are again not original. And they will again be on the Facebook group as soon as it's released to everybody, and once the podcast is released. Handily with the 3 podcasters we have the different speeds, I'd say, of painting. Michael's a god at speed. I'm the intermediate between speed and mucking about with stuff. And Eren's stuff, which you'll also see, he is quite slow, but it looks amazing whenever you get a model. And the benefit is that as these are only 10 models a lot of the time to a gang,
He can go
He
mad.
can, and in 2 months he might have one gang of spires of 5 models. But well, that'll be my challenge there, and he can't defend himself today, so I can essentially say what I like unless he edits it out.
We'll see if it comes in the final edit.
Yeah. So that's us basically. So now we're going to talk about the actual podcast itself before we go into our actual segments. Like we were saying before, the podcast is more about the lore and the models, how to make the models, conversion possibilities, and all about just showing each other as a community what we're planning to do. Maybe people might post up battle reports, all of that sort of community stuff. So
I think part of the reason for that is that we're not, although we love to play and we love to hobby and we love to paint and build and stuff, if we're not getting the gaming time, then we're not going to ever become super proficient at the game. So this podcast is not going to be the ultimate tactics and discussion wise about how you should be building your gangs and everything else, and what works, what doesn't work, because we're just not going to get the game table time to put a lot of what we waffle about into practice. So primarily we're focusing on the hobby side of it, and then if we get to play games, then great, that's a bonus, and we'll freely talk about that on the podcast. No,
100%, and it's going to be like, and it's also about the podcast, because the amount of people that have spoken about, because the Necromunda is based around certain spires, but we don't know how the next one's going to be released. Have they moved to a different spire? Is it Hive Primus still? There's obviously hives and other planets. Some people and different gangs will own those different planets, and all you have to say is that these are following the Escher's rules and how they level up and bits and pieces. But my gang's completely different.
Well, they come out and say that in the actual original rule book is that there are a number of these spires pretty much all over the galaxy on various planets and stuff. So it's not just Necromunda and it's not just Hive Primus that is the centre of everything. No. So you can do your own thing and really just go mad. Yeah,
and we'd love to see those on the Facebook group as well. So I will discuss how the episodes will run. So we'll obviously start with a welcome. The second segment will be confirmed news before pre-release. So that's today. We're planning to do the next podcast pretty much as soon as we've got the rule books in our hands.
Yeah.
Unless it's looking like the release is right at the end of November, then we might do an episode of catching up, because hopefully then there'll be bits and pieces released at that point.
There should be more substantial rumours that have been confirmed by Games Workshop.
So we'll see what we do with the next podcast. It'll either be it's literally about to start and this is what we're excited about and this is what we've seen and what we've done with our gangs since and all those bits and pieces, and maybe discussing some of the cool stuff other people have been adding to the Facebook group and stuff like that.
Yeah.
And then we will, every month we'll be doing our showcase, which is discussing the lore. Today it's about Necromunda itself, because we will talk about what it's like at the moment and where the battle is actually set. This may change ever so slightly, but we're going to actually just talk about this spire currently. But again, when the lore changes, we can discuss that if it changes in the places it is. Then we're going to talk about, but every other month after that, it will be about a certain gang. So we'll pick one of the gangs for that month, we'll discuss its lore, and after that we'll go into our gang rosters. So each of us will have a go at making up a gang roster for each of those armies, talking about why we've picked those certain weapons, why we think that those would be good for that sort of gang and what you're aiming for with that gang.
Yeah, well, hopefully that the recordings of that discussion about a particular gang hopefully will coincide with Games Workshop releasing the stuff, because initially there's going to be 2 gangs in the box, so that gives us a little bit of breathing space to start with, where we've got 2 gangs that we can talk about.
Definitely.
That are live, that are real, and that people out in the real world can actually use and see. And then hopefully in the time that it takes us to record those and get those published, we should be a few episodes down the line, and Games Workshop should start to flesh out the other gangs then.
Yeah, definitely. And I mean, I've got an Escher gang myself, and I'm already starting a Goliath one, so whichever one we pick as our next one, that we've got some stuff for that already. So that's that. And then it's about Conversion Corner, which will be my favourite bit, which is about, well, if you are going to convert this gang, we're all going to have 3 different ways that we would go about probably how we're going to create it, what models we would use, what parts we would use, what weapons we would use, how we're going to paint it, all of those bits and pieces. And again, we would encourage you guys after the episode to show us yours, tell us how you did your bits as well. So that will be my favourite part, which is just like, well, yes, there's these models, and then, like I say, it might get to a point where your favourite game still hasn't been released by Games Workshop yet, but you're really itching to make your Dulac models, or you want to use the Spire models if the rules are in there and bits and pieces. Well, this is how we think that we would like to make it, and these are all the other options that we would like.
Yeah.
And hopefully that will inspire you guys to create some of your own. And then after that will be section 6, which will be discussing our games played. If we've managed to play a game, hopefully we'll get some games in together.
Yeah, well, if I can hook up with my gaming buddy from way back when, and then wrestle these books off of him, and then hopefully, if he's still got some of his games, because he would, at the time, he would have had 2 or 3 games as well. So if he's still up for it and just wants to go down memory lane, then we'll have a go at freshening out the old rules and try and get a game in.
And we can also, I mean, if the session's only going to be, if a podcast is only going to be an hour or so long, then it might be, if we're lucky and we've been able to, our wives have released us some bits and pieces, we might actually have a game before we even really do a podcast, record a podcast.
Yeah, that gives us real world experience to draw on and to talk about. So that's good.
And then after the game's closed, we've discussed that, then it will be the close. So discussing anything we've had, where it's going to be found, all of those bits and pieces. So that's essentially it for every podcast. We'll go into our segments next, and then after that we'll discuss how you can communicate with us, where you can give feedback and all of those bits and pieces.
Yep.
So that is the first bit. So this segment is brought to you by Big Sally's Escher Strength Luminous Hair Dye. If you want to light up a room as soon as you enter, use Big Sally's Escher Strength Luminous Hair Dye. This is the same Big Sally that Eren met, so that's how he's missing today.
So we're expecting him to have a funky hairdo when we see him next.
Yeah, nice bright green.
Yeah, that'd be good.
Okay, so this is the showcase. For this episode, it's about Necromunda itself, the planet, the spire, and all of those bits and pieces, because it shouldn't change too much. The venue may change, but the spire still exists, and the gangs we know will still exist. So we will go into that today. I'll read the blurb that Necromunda starts with in the rulebook, and then we can just go into some facts about the spire, the planet, and all of those bits and pieces. So Necromunda is a game of fierce combat between rival gang fighters in the dangerous underworld of the Necromunda hives. A hive is an ancient and incomprehensibly vast city, built up upon layer upon layer, stretching 10 miles into the planet's atmosphere. To those who live in the depths, the dark ruinous Underhive offers every opportunity for wealth and power. Its collapsed chasms conceal the riches of a distant past, rare precious metals, unfathomable architect devices, wondrous mutated fungi, and much more. It's a place of danger where mutant creatures, renegades, and killers hide from the laws of house and hive. And of course, there are others who want the riches of the Underhive for themselves. I didn't do too badly. I read all the really big words and got stuck on the small ones.
It's a funny old game. Reading for children.
Yeah. Well, essentially that's my speed. It's child-based reading.
Bedtime story.
But yeah, it's Necromunda. It's a very close, compact game, but based on a massive Underhive, so it gives you so much potential for where you could be fighting.
Yeah.
I'll go into some of the bits around the actual planet itself. So the planet of Necromunda. So Necromunda is a hive world in the Segmentum Solar, and it's a major producer of munitions for the Imperial Guard.
So
it's just one of the main planets.
Yeah, so essentially it's just an industrial settlement as such that's just grown and grown and grown to meet the demands of the Imperial Guard.
And unfortunately, it's the one that it forges for las guns, auto guns, shotguns, bolt guns, and other weapons. So perfect for gangs to just take a shipment every so often.
Yep.
Have a little bit of stealing.
Or things in the scrap bin that weren't good enough for the quality standards of the Imperial Guard, if they have such a thing.
And currently they also produce their own troops for the Imperial Guard, which are most notably the Necromunda and Spiders. So they produce their own little army for the Guard.
I think that's a pretty standard thing for the Guard to take a tithe of personnel from a planet.
Yeah.
It's just part of the tax they have to pay for the Imperium's protection.
Yeah. It was founded, from the time that this is done, 15,000 years ago, as a mining colony, and it was liberated from the Orcs by the Imperial Fist during the Great Crusade. And that's how they have the ties with the Necromundan chapter. And it's still world mines, factories, refineries, and processing plants. Essentially, most of everything has been sucked out of it. So all of the ore's been removed. The oceans have turned into chemical sludge. The fertile plains have been reduced to urban developments, and full of complexes known as the hives, which are industrial towers and are called spires.
The interesting thing about that is that although they may have taken the original raw materials from the planet, they also go on to describe the fact that as the spire itself is collapsing in on itself under its own weight, new substances are being created from all the slurry and all the refuse that are being thrown out from higher up the spire. Spire, it all trickles down, filters through, and it creates new stuff that is then of value.
And it's also finding all of the old architect stuff. So the building would just collapse, and you'd find this cave, and look, this is brand new, ancient stuff that we don't quite know how it works. But if I aim this there, then it completely disappears, this wall.
Yeah, and from a gaming perspective, it means you can literally do whatever you want, because you'll be in the spire, a new cavern becomes available because something's collapsed and you've now got access into a new area. So then you can play your games within that.
Yeah, and this is why there's a potential of it being on so many different planets, because the Imperium go to a planet, they suck the daylights out of it, they build it up so there's billions upon billions of people living there, and they build all these spires, and that's, I suppose, the idea that this could technically be anywhere else. This one's based here, but there's spires everywhere.
It's essentially their model for civilian life, or a working industrial civilian life.
And I know that I've read it further on, and I'll probably end up reading it as part of a thing, but that you can be born into the Necromunda, into the hive, and never see daylight, and you're born there, you die there, and that's all you see, sort of thing, which is fairly depressing.
From the description that you get, the lower levels are literally below ground, because the ash wastes have built up over time to cover the lower levels. So literally you're below ground level now, and as you progress up, generally your status will improve until you get to the dizzy heights of above the, what do they call the barrier between the like the aristocracy. There's a name they call it. We'll find that later. Put it in the show notes.
The difficulty I'm going to have now is some of the bits that are difficult to read. So I'll be going into now. So Hive Primus has got one main ruler, who's Lord Grenadis Helmwart something of House of the same name that I tried to pronounce.
Yeah, well, go for it, GW. Well done.
But it's very much the sort of Game of Thrones sort of thing. That they're constantly in struggle to gain power and remain controller of the Hive. Because again, below that, there's 6 noble houses, which, from the murdering of what I just did there, I'm not going to attempt to also murder the names of the 6 noble houses.
But they're in the show notes.
Yeah, they're also in the rule book, so please have a look at the current rule book for the spellings. It would be nice if they spelt them phonetically as well next to it, so I could read it out. The last blurb I'm going to read is about essentially the life of someone that's born in the hive, which is what I was kind of describing before. So the hive city is divided between 6 manufacturing empires known as houses. Each house exists in its own part of the hive and governs its own affairs separately from the other houses. The hivers, as a population is called, live in dark, cramped and polluted conditions, never seeing the sun from the day they are born to the day they die. The air they breathe is recycled from above and grows more and more bitter and poisonous as it filters downwards. Even the water is distilled from the discharge from the upper hivers, and their food is factory-produced chemical nutrients, algae-based or spun from corpse starch. Conditions are crowded and insanitary, and as the hive deepens, the darker and less inhabitable the environment becomes. So essentially, not an incredibly pleasant place to live.
No, and they also go on to describe the fact that individuals who are born at a certain level of the hive sometimes will elevate themselves. They might not go very far, but they might elevate themselves a little higher in the hive, or if they fall upon hard times for whatever reason, perhaps from a manufacturing perspective, if they become injured and they can't work, then they'll fall further down the spire.
Yeah, and the more desperate you become, you then drop lower and lower down.
Yeah.
And then I think that's everyone's, then their fight is they want to, the same sort of gang thing, you want to work your way up, so you try and become more, but eventually someone's always there to take you down, and I guess that's always the way, isn't it? You survive as long as you can and do what you can to survive, and then you end up either dying or ending up where you never wanted to start with.
Yeah, you certainly don't get the impression that there's any easy life within the spire, unless you are the aristocracy at the top of the pile. But even then, you still got to be mindful of someone wanting to stab you in the back and become the new top dog. Yeah,
because that's it's with the manufacturing houses, the 6. So the Escher, the Goliath, the Orlok, the Kaldor, the Dulak, and the Vansar is they keep themselves very separate, and while they're at that level, they have to always look like they're following the law, doing everything they should, making it look like they're doing everything like a company would.
Yeah.
But you work your way down, that's when the naughtiness happens. And I think, and that's where the Necromunda is set. It's set below, where everyone's agreed that on this floor, you do the right thing. Anything goes underneath that where no one's looking.
Yeah, so, I mean, from a game perspective, that then generates your missions that you're actually trying to play. Whether it's just an all-out brawl between rival gangs, either over a piece of territory or a piece of archaeotech that's been discovered, or access to a new cavern, or whether it's something a little bit more subtle because you're trying to damage the rival gang in some way, so that then elevates your gang's status within the hive.
And I think that's where, when in the current law, which we'll go into in the future, where certain gangs don't get on with others because someone's taken someone else's. Because basically the noble gangs, from what I understand, they get the jobs and they hand them out to the gangs below, which are these 6. And then it's about dodgy dealing and bits and pieces, who can offer it for the cheapest price and all of this sort of stuff. So everyone's trying to outdo each other to get that big job. And I know that's how some of the gangs now don't get on with each other, where someone's pulled a job from someone else, or they'll deliberately blow up a couple of their places and say, well, they can't match the order, we can do it fine over here, why don't you give us the job?
Yeah, I think that's just a game mechanic that GW have written into the fluff, just to give a bit more colour and flavour to the gangs, to say, yes, this isn't, maybe a new game way back when, but these gangs have been vying for power for years and years, decades and decades, and things have happened in their past, and that's why this game does not like that game.
We just need every time you start a new game, the Game of Thrones tune going on, dun, 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 and then just little bits of Spire poking up from everywhere around, Orlok and then Goliath, and the different things. And again, like we'll say, we'll go into each of those separately in their own showcase. So essentially, that is Necromunda, the Hive. Unless you have anything else that needed to be said.
Not from a background perspective. The one thing I do struggle with reading the background and the construction of the Hive, looking from a practical engineering perspective, is that a lot of the Hive, the different levels are described as domes on top of domes on top of domes. And for me, it just doesn't make sense that you could have some construction that is purely made up of domes. For me, in my mind, it's just some gridiron network that's been created and stacked up on top, and then within those spaces that you've created, then you have the habitable space.
That's the sort of thing I'd think would be that they started with a level and built it so high and then sealed it in to keep the outside out, and then inside that you have to put buildings for each of the people to live. So
that's right.
And then what might happen is some of those pillars might collapse. Now that's built, that building is sitting on top of that building, and eventually that then is what crumbles. I mean, there's definitely the pleasure dome, because Eren wouldn't have gone there otherwise. So there is a dome in there somewhere.
Yeah, so there's places that are worth visiting.
Yeah. And there's obviously the adverts. So there are, and again, it's about, well, yes, you've got the gangs, but what else can you be throwing in there? So there is, like the different businesses and bits and pieces, that there's just lots of little things that you can just throw in yourself.
And you're not just playing, if you're playing the game or immersing yourself in the Hive, there's different areas where you could be. If you want to craft a really subtle mission, then you could potentially fight a battle or a game in one of the slightly higher levels of the Hive, because you can't afford to have an all-out war with another gang, because that wouldn't do. It's not the thing to do, because you're a bit more civilised there. But if you wanted to role play or create a very subtle industrial espionage type scenario, you could easily do that.
Yeah, I mean, there's definitely scenarios where you've got to try and sneak your way around, and some people can lay booby traps to try and catch those people out, and then the Julak are obviously much better because they had their sneak skills and stuff and the ability to sneak up and kill someone from the back, and there's just so many different. And then there's the scenarios such as trying to take your hostage back because the opposite person has made the price too high and you can't afford it, so the only way you're going to get them back is to fight them for him. And it's just so many different things. There's so many different bits that make it special, and not just, oh, well, now it's just this mission and you have to put yourself in this corner and then you have to fight that person who's in that corner, and then
it's very easy to create that movie in your mind of what's going on and why it's happening. It seems to be very easy to do that with Necromunda.
And I think what we're going to talk about after the hobby, apart from the conversion corner bit, which is about how to make the bases and how to make the terrain, is that talking about all of the different things like the Facebook groups and forums that are available, because they're great places to get ideas and businesses from.
You look back to when you and I would have first got into this, when it was first released, the internet just wasn't a thing back then. So the only information you could ever get was from a monthly White Dwarf magazine, and that was only ever what GW wanted to tell you from the mothership, whatever they were trying to flog at the time, which may or may not have been Necromunda based, depending on what was flavour of the month. Or if you went to a Games Workshop store, then you'll have the nerdy guy working in the store, Games Workshop employees, that was all super hyped and enthusiastic, but purely from a selling perspective. He just wanted to ship stuff out the door. And if you was lucky enough, you might have had a group of friends that were into it.
Or
and it was very small.
One you could headlock into playing a game. Like you could badger them. You could tell they weren't excited.
But nowadays, it's quite amazing, really, that with access to the internet, things are so much easier from a hobby and a gaming perspective. If you just randomly type in the name of the game into Google, other search engines are available. You can find a wealth of information. You'll find there'll be local gaming groups that people can join, play, chat with other people that are also into the same thing you are. And lo and behold, you'll find someone that's only just round the corner from where you are, and you can then get games in or just chat and enjoy the hobby.
No, definitely. I mean, that's essentially it in regards to this part of the showcase. Like I say, when we talk about the Facebook group, and if you join and become part of the Chronicles of the Underhive Facebook group, if any of the lore that you've read in the past, anything that you think's really cool, any bits that you've read about Necromunda or the Hive, or have you read about another spire that's really cool and why you think that would be cool, and what gangs you've heard about there, again, just join up and post that information up there.
Yeah, well, there's lots of novels as well, or like the graphic novels and stuff like that. I'm sure there's a wealth of that available for Necromunda, and at the time I never ever got involved in any of that. I just never had the time, to be fair. But now I'm actually curious to the point where I will be searching out on eBay and other channels to try and find those books and read up some more.
Yeah, because I never read the novels myself. I used to collect the comic books that came out for a short while. That had quite a bit of the Necromunda stuff, and I remember one of the comic episodes was one of the the name escapes me now. One of the spire hunters who was trying to go around killing as many people as he could, because that was how he was going to get out of the place, by getting his kill quota. And at the very last minute, a scaly climbing up behind him and twisting his arm around his back and using his own gun to kill him. And he's so close to getting out of the Underhive, and he just got killed just at the end. And that's just essentially what I love about Necromunda. You can be so close to it, and then it just gets taken away within a split second.
Yeah.
That Juve could shoot you in the head, and even though you're the best person there, that one shot that rolled a 6 and then you rolled a 6 to die, that was it. That was the end of that man. And you can cry yourself to sleep.
Yeah, that was all very. I always used to find that quite traumatic. Losing a model in the game, that was absolutely the worst.
Yeah, I think because you've named them as well, that was one of the things. You start naming them, and they get better characteristics. They get better at their job.
Yeah, you can get personally invested in your gang because, like I say, you name them, you cherish them. There's so few of them that any casualties or losses they hurt the gang.
Yeah.
And yeah, I think it's just a great part of the game. There's, like you say, the scaling up, scaling down as they get better or get worse.
Yeah, and then you sadly have to retire someone because they've had both their arms blown off.
And then you have to start again with some Jew that doesn't know one end of a bolt gun
Stub
from
gun.
another.
I only ever give them the stub gun. I don't if they're going to get shot in the face, they can have the cheapest weapon there is. Okay, so that's the end of the showcase. So again, that segment was brought to you by Big Sally's Escher Strength Luminous Hair Dye. If you want to light up a room as soon as you enter, use Big Sally's Escher Strength Luminous Hair Dye. Welcome back to the conversion corner part now. So we're going to be discussing about boards, how we would create our bases and how we would create our scenery and terrain. This segment is brought to you by Hulking Joe's Goliath Strength Muscle Tonic. If you want muscles on your muscles and the strength to rival any mutant scaly, then use Hulking Joe's Goliath Strength Muscle Tonic. So Michael will be starting this one off, as I know that he's planning to build his scenery a lot quicker than me.
Yeah, well, I've got to get some first.
Yeah.
But essentially, the original version of the game, all of the missions were pretty much played on a 4x4 table. So you wanted enough terrain to fill that up, so you've got vantage points and you can start plenty of places to hide.
Yeah.
Because cover is a significant part of the game.
Yeah, definitely.
Whether you're hunkered behind a piece of cover or you're moving from one piece of cover to the other, giving you options for overwatch and things like that. So terrain is your friend when you're talking Necromunda.
Yeah.
And what separates Necromunda from the other flagship game from GW at the time, 40k, was the fact that it was designed to be on multi-levels rather than just a relatively flat surface.
Yeah.
So you want height and you want hiding places, things that block line of sight, and also random pieces of scatter terrain that your models can move from one section to another without being seen or taking a very small risk.
And the walkways I always found were a big thing because you could fall off them. And
that's another element of the rules that just adds another risk.
Yeah.
So you get yourself into that vantage point, that good position to shoot, but if you take a hit, there's a chance that you're going to go over the side, and the higher you are,
the harder the fall.
the more it hurts. The new rules for Necromunda, because they've now gone away initially from the 3D format, they've gone to a more 2D board-based scenario. It looks to be a much smaller playing area than what would have been the old 4x4. I'm hoping, expectingly, that things will expand and it will scale up to larger size games. And I think GW have tried to alleviate a lot of people's fears by coming out and openly saying that they will be expanding into a 3-dimensional space.
I mean, I definitely read that even in the first bit where they released the game, they definitely said it was going to also become 3-dimensional as well.
Yeah.
I think people panicked when they saw the tiles.
Yeah, I must admit, I was kind of hoping that they was going to rebox the stuff they had for the Shadow Wars stuff, because it seems like a bit of a no-brainer that you throw all of that exact same package, throw that in a box, put some Necromunda models in there, change the paperwork, change the artwork on the box, and then you've got Necromunda. But that was obviously not to be, certainly not yet. But we shall move on. So the old terrain that used to come with the game that allowed you to get that 3-dimensional space, it was made up of pieces of cardboard which were printed, I believe they were printed on both sides as well. So it was double-sided printing, which is good for the time when it was made, and a series of clipped together plastic bulkheads which then allows you to get the height or to make boxes and enclosed spaces. The contents of the box was enough to plonk into the middle of your table, so long as you didn't go too crazy on the height, then you had enough to cover a decent space. They're still kind of available on the second-hand market because people are finding them in their old boxes of stuff and selling on eBay, so they do turn up, and there are people now printing 3D printing sort of copies of the original stuff, or doing their own thing. So the card and plastic combination back then was very good, and it made it look different to the other games that were available from a very limited number of other manufacturers, and it made it look different from 40k, which was great. But now, in this more modern time, the new terrain options are just staggering.
Yeah,
there's
100%.
With the advent of laser cutting of MDF, there's so many companies out there that are offering good stuff, and now that GW, they're still arguably the biggest kid in the playground, other companies like Mantic have sort of stepping up to rival them and coming up with good quality plastic kits. Still not to the same level of detail and intricacy perhaps as the GW stuff, but still perfectly serviceable in what is essentially a utilitarian, industrial looking aesthetic.
Yeah, definitely.
So we've got a number of different options laid out for us. Let's start with Games Workshop, seeing as they're the game creators. The sort of stuff that they sell at the moment that would be very appropriate to Necromunda is anything from their current range of scenery for the Shadow Wars era of 40k, because they've gone away from the ruined look of older buildings and scenery kits, and they're now going into what looks to be fully functional industrial stuff.
And you can see that in the bases that they kind of want you to buy as well for Necromunda.
The bases that they sell for the actual models now fit in and tie in exactly with that scenery kit, so you can get that fully integrated look if you want. So Games Workshop stuff, the scenery that they've always produced has been a really good quality plastic. It's heavier than the plastic that's used for the individual models, and it's very robust, although there are some spindly bits they've added to these kits, so you've got different pipes and stuff.
I have noticed with the Games Workshop now, because they're always trying to push themselves to be better than the competition. There's a lot of circular stuff in these now. Like there's a lot more pipes. There's even some of the structures are circular rather than these guys can do with their MDF, where it's kind of square, flat bits linked together.
That's one of the disadvantages of the laser cut MDF at this time, is that making circles and curves is problematic. It's not impossible, but it is problematic.
Yeah. And they do, if you can get a good paint job, and I've seen loads of people doing the GW stuff, the scenery, it does look awesome.
Yeah.
Especially with crabby floating spider or hanging spider mechanical robot thing.
And also, if you're fortunate enough to be able to get up to Warhammer World and have a look in their display section, they've got one table or one cabinet that's got a multi-level, what looks to be an oil rig, for want of a better word. And they've got 4 great big pillars of platforms that you can go up, and then more on the top with building bits on stuff. It's absolutely incredible, but you certainly wouldn't want to pay for that. You can tell that it's a GW construction using their kits, which is great, but if you was to cost up the individual kits, you'd probably spend £2,000 to recreate that.
Yeah, and I think that's the thing that kind of sometimes will put people off the Games Workshop stuff, is that I wouldn't look at that stuff and say that it's overcosted for what it is, because it's awesome. But if the game and me playing a game is what I really want, and the models I'm happy with, then I can kind of calm myself down on the scenery a bit. So as long as it's leveled, and as long as I've painted it nice, and as long as it doesn't take me away from my background. I mean, if someone was to give me the GW stuff, I'd be as happy as Larry, and it would be my first choice. If someone said, well, I've got Necromunda's worth of terrain, what company would you want? I would pick Games Workshop straight away.
Yeah.
But for the price level and the fact that I probably wouldn't choose that as my choice currently, looking at all of the stuff that we have in front of us.
Yeah. And the thing as well with the GW scenery is it's kind of boxed and packaged to suit realistically 40k, which, although it enjoys and plays better when you have got scenery on the table with the line of sight blocking, it doesn't need quite as much. So although you might be playing on a 6x4 table with 40k, a few scattered pieces of terrain and then some other little bits and pieces, and you're good to go. With Necromunda, the density of the terrain is much more, so that although your playing surface is smaller, you've got considerably more terrain and you need that height. So potentially, rather than just having one of a piece of kit, you might want to have 4 or 5 so that you can stack them on top to get the height, and that's when suddenly it becomes ludicrously expensive.
It gets quite pricey.
However, having said that, at the cheaper end of the market, their Promethean Pipeway box set, I think, is exceptional value. It's about £20 to £25, depending on whether you get it direct from them or from somewhere where you can get a discount. And it's a nice little kit to put together. It goes together easy. It's modular, so you can either hard glue it together if you want a particular set of terrain pieces, or you could magnetise them or keep them separate.
Because they could easily as much run up a tower.
Exactly, they can run vertical as well as they can horizontal. And also, cunningly, I think GW have been a bit cute on this. The new Shadow Wars kits have got segments that look like they'll plug straight into that pipe kit. So it really is been quite well thought out. Like the heights of different access ways and ports on the side of the cylindrical tower thing. You can literally run the pipeway straight up to the side of that, and it looks like it was meant to be there.
Because I think the likelihood would be I'd bulk out my board with another company stuff, but I'd use the Games Workshop stuff to make it that last little bit special.
Just a few accent pieces here and there, or even get one kit from the GW stuff and then just scatter the pieces into the other terrain pieces. Because
I like the little. Have you seen the little cranny cars and bits and pieces?
They look really good.
And I've always wanted to try it. I've got chipping fluid and I've never used it, but I want to start giving that a go, because now as I'm driving to places and going through the countryside, I can see all the tractors and all of the farm equipment that's got all the paint starting to flake off, and I want to take photos because I want to do the same sort of effect. And
Yeah.
I think that's put me off my driving when I'm going through when I'm driving through the country.
You carry on doing that, you
Yeah.
might have some chips off your own paint.
Yeah, or my wife's car, she can.
So for the time being then, sticking with plastic, we'll move over to what Mantic offer. At the time that we're talking now, I think Mantic have taken off sale their Battle Zones range of terrain, which was to go with their Dead Zone game.
Okay.
It's a very modular, very square looking aesthetic that they've created. I think the premise of what they designed within the game system that they created was that these are supposed to be shipping containers that are dropped from outer space,
Right.
and then they've been repurposed. Once the contents of those shipping containers have been used or taken out to do stuff, then the containers are repurposed. So that's why it's very blocky, very square, cubic.
What they've been doing with shipping containers at the moment, where people have been making them into houses as well.
Yeah, and then charging a lot of money for them.
It's fashionable, isn't it?
Yeah, hipsters, gotta love them. So the Mantic stuff is very blocky, but you could argue that the aesthetic could work for certain areas of the Underhive.
Yeah.
You could have certain levels of the spire could be more intact and not damaged, not quite so industrial, because that's perhaps the habitation area.
Yeah, that's the situation about to say. It could be where everyone's living, and
Yeah.
the fights broke out in the. Because again, there's ones where there's like a gun holdout where two people are walking towards each other until the
Yeah,
first
like
one
a shootout,
breaks.
like an old Western shootout. Nobody wants to fight first.
No, and that would probably be happening around the residential areas where the drinking bars are and stuff like that, and you accidentally bump into your rival gang.
Yeah, but I also think like I said, with Mantic stuff, they've either sold out or they've taken it off sale. Mantic are so close to GW geographically, and they're not afraid to try and poach some of GW's market share, that I'm sure in the background they're frantically reproducing, redesigning and tweaking their terrain kits that they're going to then flood the market pretty imminently.
And I've got a feeling that a lot of companies are going to start, like even the ones we're going to be talking about in a minute as well, they're going to be bringing out extra bits now.
They want to make money off the back of a product that another manufacturer has made, and good luck to them.
Yeah.
And for us as a gamer, as a hobbyist, it's more choice, and that's ultimately the best thing that we could ever have, rather than being forced to only have one aesthetic, one option.
Definitely. And like we've said, we're going to be talking about other games as well, and like you were saying earlier about the ability to actually use this scenery not just for Necromunda but for other games that we're going to have.
Because ultimately scenery is bulky, it takes up space, and okay, some of you guys listening who live in America are blessed with humongous properties and stuff and basements that you can fill up to your heart's content. In the UK, the properties generally are smaller, so your hobby space is also smaller.
Yeah.
And you want to protect your models, so they go into your nice cushy cases to protect them, which takes up space. And then your scenery, if you want to have home games, scenery is easily fill a wardrobe up with scenery just for one table, and then you've only got one look. So, and you want to have alternate options.
Yeah.
So that's more and more.
That's the my brain would want me to make the scenery as one, build this massive, awesome hive, and glue it to the base, so I could easily just move the base out of the way whenever I want. After 3 games, I'd want to take it apart and build it somewhere, something slightly different. And I think it's going to just have to be a working out of, well, I can build this one big building all as one, and I can build this one big building as all as one, and then I've got lots of little segments, and I've got to try and work out a way of engineering it.
I think walkways are your friend. I think if you can build modular sections that you can just put onto the board in any position you want, and build it so that you can just span gaps at the same level with walkways, then I think you're good, because you can create the variety that you're after. So talking with that, let's move on to one of the laser cut options. We've got War Games tournaments. They do some awesome terrain and bundles of terrain as well, so you can literally, for a one click, and it's at a good price as well. I think they're about 40 or 50 quid, something like that. You can actually get quite a large chunk of terrain, which is going to cover a fair portion of your table.
I mean, I've struggled a couple of times not to click on it, because there's some of these where it's just go on, just one click,
Go on, do it.
And some of them are huge, just huge things that I think, even like the one that I'm looking at that I really want, I think would be too big for what I'd need, and if you only had 2 gangs, you'd you'd spend 8 turns trying to
find the models,
or trying to get them to even meet each other.
But
it does look amazing, and I do love the smell of burnt MDF. It does smell amazing.
But MDF opens up a whole new world, because they can be produced pretty quickly, as long as someone can draw what they need and then just set the machine off making it. It's packaged and sent to your door, nice, because it's all flat packed. You just pop it out and glue it together, slot it together, whatever you need to do. But the War Games tournament stuff from their industrial range, it's very Necromunda-esque in its style. You've got lots of walkways, you've got multi-level towers and railings and stuff like that around the edges. So it'd be very easy to give a quick coat of paint to that, some weathering, and you would be more than appropriate for the game. On a similar basis, you've got TT Combat. They also do a similar thing. It doesn't look quite as delicate as the War Games tournament stuff. It seems to have a lot of fine detail and fine spindly pieces, which may or may not be a good thing, but it certainly looks good. Whereas TT Combat looks to be more solid, arguably more robust. But then you might have to work a bit harder on the painting to try and make those flat surfaces look good. Until you get them in your hand, it's going to be difficult to say. But once again, with TT Combat, a lot of their kits are out of stock with a lot of the third-party retailers and stuff like that. So their sci-fi range is getting quite difficult to get hold of. However, in the last week, as we record this, they've recently issued photographs of what their new kits are going to be. So they're obviously jumping on perhaps the Necromunda bandwagon. And they're making some new bits of scenery. And the aesthetic of that is drawing quite heavily on the look of the Games Workshop stuff.
I'll have to have a look.
So rather than having a traditional handrail, which like just a post and then a rail, they're going very much for the segmented barriers that the Games Workshop terrain are having. It's difficult to try and describe it, but you know what I mean.
It's just like a 3-piece picket fence, and then there's a gap, and then there's another 3, and they're all separate bits rather than one just massive.
And TT Combat's new stuff seems to be picking up those elements. So, good thing if you were looking at mixing and matching, you could bulk out the table with the TT Combat MDF stuff because it's still relatively cheap, and then get 1 or 2 key pieces of the Games Workshop stuff, and the aesthetic should slot and gel together quite nicely.
Nice.
And I think that would be a good compromise of going a little bit of this and a little bit of that.
And then your eyes will keep getting drawn to the Games Workshop stuff, and then all of the ledges and all of the steps and all the things that don't really get looked at very much can be a cheaper option.
Definitely. Next one we've got is Sarissa Precision. They do a range of MDF stuff. It looks to be more habitation type stuff that's suitable for games perhaps like Infinity and stuff like that. However, they do some ruined versions of the same terrain pieces, which are a little bit more lower level hive stuff, and that looks to be appropriate as far as I can see.
I mean, this is the first time I'm looking at it today, and it looks like, because I've been playing Fallout 4, and it looks like the bomb has just gone off, and these are all the buildings that are now crumbling around because of it. You could easily use these in different games for that post-apocalyptic game style.
Definitely.
Mad Max could be running around here in this car, and
there's no reason why not. They also do like a tower come silo water tank, whatever you want to call it, which is reminiscent of some of the industrial looking things that you can find from GW. So that is kind of a direct slot in piece, but once again, as we discussed earlier, trying to get curved shapes with MDF is problematic, so it's more of like a hexagon shape. But the flat surfaces, if you don't mind that aesthetic, that look, then those flat surfaces can be a boon to someone who's good at painting.
Yeah.
Or even if you're going to put scaled down posters. I've seen a lot of that recently.
Yeah.
Where people are getting posters or images off the internet, they're miniaturising it as such and printing it out.
Yeah.
And they literally just stick it on as wallpaper, as billboards and things like that.
That's what I'm looking forward to doing.
And for someone who's rubbish at freehand painting, like myself, that's great because I can just print them out in full colour, cut them out with a pair of scissors, and then a bit of PVA, stick it on the side.
Yeah.
And leave the corner peeling off a bit. and it's
yeah,
good.
Deliberate as well.
And finally, it's kind of the pinnacle at the moment of MDF terrain. Not necessarily for Necromunda's perspective, because their range of stuff isn't that great, is Foreground. They do some amazing kits. You pay for it, it costs you money, but it comes pre-painted with so much detail and stuff on it. They do a hell of a range for fantasy type games and the sort of fantasy skirmish stuff, and they look absolutely amazing. Their sci-fi stuff is good, but focuses mainly on fully constructed habitation type things.
It looks a lot cleaner than I'd imagine Necromunda would be.
Yeah, but once again, weathering has got to be your friend. You could take those kits, put them on the table, and then if you just weather them to death, then you can make them look run down. And
put the rubbish out and put the scattered terrain around, and
and I think they would work, but you're paying for the fact that it's pre-coloured, pre-painted. It just depends what your bag is. If you're not a hobbyist and you literally want to throw some good-looking terrain on the table and play, then it's not a bad option.
But it's good, like we said before, it's good to have options.
Yeah.
Because, I mean, I would lean towards MDF because I've always wanted to make my own. But some people be like, well, no, I love the GW stuff and I've got the money and I want to pick the best scenery.
And you just need to decide what you want from your terrain. Is it a showpiece thing that's just going to sit on a shelf and showcase the models that you've done, or do you want to be playing on it regularly? So then you need something that's robust. Add on to that the fact that if you're looking at it from a club perspective, where week in, week out, you've got people that don't own that scenery and aren't financially invested in that scenery, who are handling it, using it, taking it out of boxes, putting it into boxes week in, week out. Stuff gets damaged. And it's how repairable something is. The plastic stuff, with a bit more plastic glue and cleaning up that joint, you can weld that back together. The MDF stuff, I'm not so sure. You can brace things and you can PVA it or super glue it, and it probably would survive again. Or you live with the fact that something's become damaged and that becomes a thing. It's now a damaged walkway and stuff like that.
Just I'm going to keep my kids away from it as well.
It's probably best. They'll love the look of it, I'm sure.
Yeah. But and again, like we've said on the Facebook group, there's going to be plenty that we've missed. Also, I know there's some different companies who just make this. It would be perfect for the scattered terrain, like the crates and the barrels. And
there's umpteen versions. Like most of the big manufacturers will do some limited range of scatter stuff. GW still, as far as I know, are still selling their accessories sprues for 40k, which is like tank traps, barrels, and a couple of crates. And I don't think that's particularly expensive.
No.
It's not a very big collection of stuff, but if you just want a few little pieces, there's other companies that are making stuff either in plastic. Renadra, they do plastic barrels. Admittedly, they're wooden versions of barrels, which perhaps isn't quite appropriate to Necromunda, because there ain't no trees.
No. Well, they're definitely gone now.
But there's lots of options out there, whether it's barrels, whether it's crates, whether it's shipping containers, piles of rubble, old tyres, wheels, and old bits of machinery. There's so many options.
Yeah. And is there anything else do you think we need to add?
No, well, the final thing is the big showcase pieces. If you want something to be a centrepiece of your table, there's giant cranes, which I think you said were from War Games Tournament.
That's where I found the ones that I liked,
and it's absolutely humongous, and would be a centrepiece for a table or a display. How playable it would be in game, because you'd imagine that the boom coming off of the crane, unless it was mounted horizontally, you're not really going to be able to use it. It's just going to be there to look good.
Yeah.
But the base and the pillar, the tower of the crane, could potentially be usable.
Yeah, I mean, I know my friend Sam from another podcast. He loves his cranes, and I would always imagine that I'd have a crane where someone again would be standing on the top trying to pick a shot. Just before he gets shot. Yeah, before he gets shot and then drops off.
Mate, don't forget your clip harness.
Yeah. Well, I mean, a lot of the time, I mean, even in films you see it a lot. There's always in action, there'll be a crane and there'll be fighting happening on a crane and bits and pieces. So I think it just leads me into that sort of thing. Is that I've seen plenty of times where cranes have been involved in action somewhere. So I don't know. I like cranes too.
Yeah,
I think I have Sam's addiction.
Then the final thing that I discovered very recently with TT Combat's latest release is they've got a giant, what looks like an oil rig, or what could be an oil rig. It's got 4 great big legs with multi-level platforms with handrails and stuff around it, and a huge square rectangular platform on the top, which looked pretty plain, to be fair, but there's no reason why you can't then start stacking stuff further on top of that if you want to add even more height. But there was no mention of the size of it, although they did show in one of the photographs they had 2 Valkyries and they weren't nose to nose diagonally on this thing, so it's got to be 2 foot by probably 18 inches maybe, and the height of it probably a good 2 feet maybe more.
It's a big old thing.
So you could construct that into the centre of your table if you want to make a showpiece gaming table, and then put lots of these other pieces of scenery around the edge, connect it all with walkways, and off you go. That'd be fantastic.
I think in my dream world I'd have my garage and have a board kind of sitting on the roof on a pulley system, so it's always out of the way.
I always wanted one of those for a train set when I was a kid.
And then lower the rope down and then the terrain, so you never have to pack it away and it never gets damaged. You can just pull it up again and it raises up.
Yeah, you have to sweep off all the spiders and cobwebs, that's the only trouble. But
also, I'm terrible at pulleys and wires as well, so I'm sure I'll let one rope go and then the
what's the worst that can happen?
Yeah, it's only my terrain that I spent absolutely ages on, just precariously floating above the top of my garage.
I think the only other final thing, just to wrap this little segment up, is the terrain that you use in the games. The more you get on the table, the better your table looks and the better your game feels. But the disadvantage, the more dense you have the terrain, the more difficult it is to actually physically play the game. Because you do need that bit of line of sight. You do need to be able to get your head down. Can my model see your model? And when you've got loads of terrain, it's hard. It's just so difficult. Which means, from a competitive point of view, if you're playing against someone that's going to argue the toss every time over a situation, then you're potentially not going to have a long-term fun time.
Yeah.
But if you're playing with friends that you're much more relaxed and more lenient with the rules, then it looks like you can probably see him and you just get on and play it.
I think also just the ability to reach your models as well.
Yeah, moving.
Yeah. Because someone will have a building in the middle and then will want their models to pass through that building, but you can't get your hand in, so how do you... They're not going to get to the other end of the...
Push it with a little red point.
Get the old range ruler and just give it a little notch every 2 times. So it can be... I think that's also quite important when you do the scenery, is that something's got to look awesome, but if you can't get your model through the building... and
it's got to be playable.
Yeah. I think that's all just testing and trying, and then once you're finally happy, that's when you start gluing stuff into place. Don't glue it in until you've tested.
I think that just about wraps that one up.
Brilliant. Okay, and like I've said halfway through the episode, if there are anything that you think are cool that you've found, and there's an ice cream van. Get one and then we'll come back. But if there's anything in the Facebook group that you found, anything you think's great, post it up on the Facebook in regards to terrain for this episode, and people will be able to see it and also then follow those links and have a look and maybe buy those things as well. So this episode again, this segment was brought to you by Hulking Joe's Goliath Strength Muscle Tonic. If you want muscles on your muscles and the strength to rival any mutated scaly, then use Hulking Joe's Goliath Strength Muscle Tonic. Okay guys, we're coming up to the end of this whole podcast. We won't be doing obviously the games played because we've not played any yet. So I wanted to talk about some of the different forums, different places where you can go for your Necromunda needs. In regards to just forums, I have been on, and I used to go on quite a lot, Yak Tribe, which it's not just Necromunda, it's also things like Gorkamorka and lots of other bits and pieces. It was a place, I sometimes struggle to find it now, but you can create a gang roster easily without doing it on paper. You could do it on the computer, and it used to have a cool feature, which I know where you were saying you were struggling about working out who was who. You can get little pictures, take photos of your models, and then put them on the gang roster so you can see exactly.
That's definitely the way to go with the new technology. Yeah. Why not use it?
Then that was definitely cool. So in regards to forums, that's what I have. Did you have any forums that you?
Not so much forums, but I found a couple of useful blogs that I kind of loosely follow. There's a guy called Kiblams. He's got a YouTube channel. He's got all the outlets. He's got a Facebook page. He's got Twitter and everything else. And he's just really an enthusiastic hobbyist, for want of a better word. He's got his toes in a number of different game systems, and from what I've seen of his work, he tends to like the smaller skirmishy games and the story behind the games.
Right.
So he did a reasonable indulgence into Gorkamorka, and the stuff that he was creating for that using plastic card to make scenery is relevant to anyone wanting to construct scenery for Necromunda.
Okay.
So you could watch some of his videos and get some ideas on his methods of how he's cutting and assembling stuff to go together.
Okay.
And he liked to do things that are modular, that you can take apart, put together, things that slot in, things that might be retained with a magnet and things like that. So that's quite useful for people that are light on space and need to be able to pack away their stuff at the end of a gaming session or something.
Yeah.
So I find him quite entertaining. I also expect him to probably pick up Necromunda because, like I said, he seems to favour the smaller games and stuff like that. So I would imagine that Necromunda would probably feature in his upcoming content.
Okay.
The other blog that I found, it's an old blog, but there's a guy called, I'm going to pronounce this wrong, it's not his name, it looks like the Nike Ninja .wordpress. That's the sort of blog address. We'll put the link in the show notes so you can check it out. And he's got some amazing Necromunda scenery and terrain that he's built, constructed, painted, and everything. There's just pages and pages and pages of stuff.
Okay.
And as I said, it's quite old. It's probably a few years old now, but obviously he was still keeping his hobby alive at that point, and all the things that he was building and constructing then are still relevant now.
Cool.
You know, to give ideas of how you can do something or what materials you might need. So it's certainly worth just getting some inspiration from there. Okay.
Yeah, because I mean, where I've been finding most of my inspiration recently is seeing all the different groups on Facebook. Facebook I use quite a lot. Necromunda Worldwide is one that I look at quite a lot, and now that the new game's coming out, is quite active. Has lots of people's different conversions, people building terrain, just loads and loads of stuff based on Necromunda.
Yeah, the good thing about them as well is they've got a wide variety of different people. So you get, it's not just GW focused, it's not just the GW models only and we don't want anything else.
Yeah.
It's not just the GW cardboard and plastic bulkheads, they're just everything. Anything and everything Necromunda. It's a great little Facebook page.
Yeah. And then there's Gang Warfare Society, which I've just joined recently. Very similar. Just lots and lots of cool different gangs, different armies, not using the same models, just lots of cool things. And the last one, which isn't necessarily Necromunda, which is Inquisitorium, which is kind of a game that's sort of Necromunda / the old Inquisitor roleplay game, but on 28mm, which kind of has its own rules as well. But just some of the cool conversions, some of the things that are made there, even single miniatures, all of that sort of stuff. It's not even that you're looking at it to see what Necromunda stuff you can make. It's just seeing so many different cool conversions and thinking, wow, that's really cool, and that head looks really good. I never thought of using it for that.
It's inspiration. That's what the internet is great for. Because you've got so many images and people willing to show off what they've done that you can just, if you're stuck for what to do or just an idea, just go and pinch and improve, find something that you like the look of, and then do it your way.
Yeah. No, I mean, those are the Facebook groups that I look at mainly for Necromunda based stuff. I know I also, in the same thing would be Kit Bash Carnage, which again, that's definitely not just Necromunda based, but again, it's just lots of cool inspiration about how to just make so many different things that weren't supposed to be made from the models that were there.
Yeah.
And it's just that sort of stuff. It's those sorts of things which made me so excited about Necromunda and all those bits and pieces, just the constant conversion possibilities that are available. But that's it in regards to inspiration currently.
Well, I suppose the main place for inspiration is going to be our own Facebook group.
Oh, yeah.
That would be a great place to go.
Thank you, Michael. That would be a good start. So, yeah. As I've mentioned a few times, so we're going to have the Facebook group Chronicles of the Underhive, or Chronicles from the Underhive, should I say, and that will be a place where we would love for you guys to input in regards to what we've discussed, and like I say today, if there was any cool terrain or anything like that, or if you're working on a gang that you've just started, if you've had any completed gangs already waiting to come into the game, me, Eren and Michael will be putting our stuff on, anything that we've discussed in that week as to that month as to what gang am I trying to finish. When it's finished, it will be up on that page. If you have any ideas for what we could do on in the future, if you want to go via the Messenger app, or if you have any any ideas that you'd want to say or anything that you thought could make it better, if you do it through the Messenger rather than starting another post, the post will be for all of the cool stuff. But please feel free, if you have an idea or if you have something you need to say, I'm more than able to read your Messenger.
Yeah, or even segments that you'd like us, or topics that you'd like us to discuss. We've got a rough plan for the next few months worth of content, but obviously if there's burning issues that people want to discuss and talk about, then we're happy to alter our plans to accommodate some of that. And also, we don't know what the release schedule for GW is going to be. It could be fast and furious, it could be long and drawn out. We don't know what they're going to bring out, so our plans will change a little depending on what GW throw at us, because we'll obviously talk about what's new. But what you don't want to do is be wildly speculating. Yeah. We want to try and keep this factual and honest and tell you guys what it is. Yeah,
and I think that's in exactly the same regards to the actual Facebook group as well. So obviously our group is about the lore, the conversions and bits and pieces. So it's not necessary. You can obviously write about what you'd be looking forward to, but it's not going to be a group where people can complain about they've just read the rule book and they don't like this, or they've just read the rule book and they don't like that, or that's not really what this face group will be about. So I'll have a pinned post at the top so you kind of get an idea of the sort of feel it's going to be, but it's definitely going to be along the lines of positivity and look what I'm making, or this is what I'm planning to do, not this sucks, I prefer the old one, or this is that and this is this. And we won't be going into the rules or saying, well, why that gun sucks in comparison to that, why would you ever bring... You'll tell from the podcast that that's not the sort of thing that we'll be doing in the podcast itself, so it's not really going to be taken up very much on the Facebook group itself. Yeah. So if you enjoyed any of this, or all of it, or some of it, and you want to be part of the Facebook group as well, come send your requests and we will happily accept you. But that is it from the very first episode. Next month, hopefully, there'll be 3 of us, unless one of us goes to the pleasure zone and we also get on well.
It depends on what Eren catches.
Yeah. So that's the end of Chronicles from the Underhive. We hope you have a good month, and let's hope that the next Necromunda release is awesome. Okay.
See you again soon.
See you. Bye. Okay guys, before the closing outro, I forgot to say thanks to Sam from the Adeptus Terra podcast and Jason from the Sons of Heresy for giving me some advice on how to record, how to host. So without some of you guys' help, this may never have got off the ground. So thank you very much guys. And that was the end of Chronicles from the Underhive, a Necromunda and Post Apocalyptic podcast. We hope you enjoyed it. All the things we talk about in this podcast can be found at the Chronicles from the Underhive Facebook group. We'll post up links to all of the websites we discussed and the current projects we're working on. Come and join us and post up your Necromunda projects. We hope to see you there, and may you never roll a double on your gambling bill.